Part 5. Graveyard. Southwest Arizona serves as an ideal graveyard for airplanes. It has a dry, clear, and virtually smog free climate that helps minimize corrosion. It has an alkaline soil so firm that airplanes can be towed and parked on the surface without sinking. An airplane graveyard is not just a fence around airplane carcasses and piles of scrap metal. Rather, many millions of dollars worth of surplus parts are salvaged to keep active aircraft flying. Joe Zentner, Airplane Graveyards from desertusa.com. Chapter 32. The Admiral. The blazing sun bakes the Arizona hardpan by day, and the temperature plunges at night. More than 4,000 planes from every era of aviation history shine in the heat of that sun. From cruising altitude, the rows of planes look like crop lines, a harvest of abandoned technology. Number 1. You arrived here by necessity. You stay here by choice. From way up there, you can't see that some of those grounded jets are occupied. 33 to be exact. Spy satellites can catch the activity, but catching it and noticing it are two different things. CIA data analysts have far more pressing things to look for than a band of refugee unwinds. This is what the Admiral's counting on. But just in case, the rules in the graveyard are strict. All activity takes place in the fuselage or under the wings, unless it's absolutely necessary to go out into the open. The heat helps enforce the edict. Number 2, surviving has earned you the right to be respected. The Admiral doesn't exactly own the graveyard, but his management is undisputed and he answers to no one but himself. A combination of business sense, favors owed, and a military willing to do anything to get rid of him are what made such a sweet deal possible. Number 3, my way is the only way. The graveyard is a thriving business. The Admiral buys decommissioned airplanes and sells the parts or even resells them whole. Most business is done online. The Admiral is able to acquire about one retired jet a month. Of course, each one arrives loaded with a secret cargo of unwinds. That's the real business of the graveyard, and business has been good. Number 4, your life is my gift to you. Treat it like one. Buyers do, on occasion, come to inspect or to pick up merchandise, but there's always plenty of warning. From the time they enter the gate, it's 5 miles to the yard itself. It gives the kids more than enough time to disappear like gremlins into the machinery. These types of business related visitors come only about once a week. There are people who wonder what the Admiral does with all the rest of his time. He tells them he's building a wildlife preserve. Number 5, you are better than those who would unwind you. Rise to the occasion. There are only 3 adults in the Admiral's employ: 2 office workers stationed in a trailer far from the unwinds, and a helicopter pilot. The pilot goes by the name of Cleaver, and he has 2 jobs. The first is to tour important buyers around the lot in style. The second is to take the Admiral on trips around the graveyard once a week. Cleaver is the only employee who knows about the horde of unwinds sequestered in the far reaches of the lot. He knows, but he's paid more than enough to keep quiet. And besides, the Admiral trusts Cleaver implicitly. One must trust one's personal pilot. Number 6, everyone in the graveyard contributes, no exceptions. The real work in the yard is done by the unwinds. There are whole teams specially designated to strip the jets, sort parts, and get them ready for sale. It's just like any other junkyard, but on a larger scale. Not all the jets get stripped. Some remain untouched if the Admiral thinks he can resell them whole. Some are retooled as living quarters for the kids who are, both literally and figuratively, under his wing. Number 7, teenage rebellion is for suburban schoolchildren. Get over it. The kids are grouped in teams best suited for their jobs, their ages, and their personal needs. A lifetime of experience molding military booths into a coherent fighting force has prepared the Admiral for creating a functional society out of angry, troubled kids. Number 8, hormones will not rule my desert. Girls are never grouped with boys. Number 9, at 18, you cease to be my concern. The Admiral has a list of his 10 supreme rules posted in each and every plane where the kids live and work. The kids call them the 10 Demandments. He doesn't care what they call them, as long as each and every one of them knows the list by heart. Number 10. Make something of yourself. This is an order. It's a challenge keeping almost 400 kids healthy, hidden, and whole. But the Admiral has never walked away from a challenge, and his motivation for doing this, like his name, is something he prefers to keep to himself. Chapter 33. Risa. For Risa, the first days in the graveyard are harsh and seem to last forever. Her residency begins with an exercise in humility. Every new arrival is required to face a tribunal. Three 17-year-olds sitting behind a desk in the gutted shell of a wide bodied jet, two boys and a girl. These three, together with Amp and Jeeves, who Risa met when she first stepped off the plane, make up the elite group of five everyone calls the Goldens. They're the Admiral's five most trusted kids, and therefore the ones in charge. By the time they get to Risa, they've already processed 40 kids. Tell us about yourself, says the boy on the right. Starboard boy, she calls him, since after all, they're in a vessel. What do you know, and what can you do? The last tribunal Risa faced was back at Steho when she was sentenced to be unwound. She can tell these three are bored and don't care what she says, just as long as they can get on to the next one. She finds herself hating them, just as she hated the headmaster that day he tried to explain why her membership in the human race had been revoked. The girl who sits in the middle must read her feelings because she smiles and says, "Don't worry, this isn't a test. We just want to help you find where you'll fit in here." It's an odd thing to say, since not fitting in is every unwind's problem. Risa takes a deep breath. "I was a music student at Steho," she says, then immediately regrets telling them she's from a state home. Even among unwinds, there's prejudice and pecking orders. Sure enough, Starboard leans back, crossing his arms in clear disapproval. But the portside boy says, "I'm a ward too. Florida Steho 18. Ohio 23. "What instrument do you play?" the girl asks. "Classical piano." "Sorry," says Starboard. "We've got enough musicians, and none of the planes came with a piano." "Survival has earned me the right to be respected," Risa says. "Isn't that one of the Admiral's rules? I don't think he'd like your attitude." Starboard squirms. "Can we just get on with this?" The girl offers an apologetic grin. "As much as I hate to admit it, in the here and now, there are other things we need before a virtuoso. What else can you do?" "Just give me a job and I'll do it," Risa says, trying to get this over with. "That's what you're going to do anyway, right?" "Well, they always need help in the galley," says Starboard, "especially after meals." The girl gives Risa a long, pleading look, perhaps hoping that Risa will come up with something better for herself. But all Risa says is, "Fine, dishwasher. Am I done here?" She turns to leave, doing her best to douse her disgust. The next kid comes in as she's heading out. He looks awful. His nose is swollen and purple, his shirt is caked with dried blood, and both his nostrils have started bleeding fresh. "What happened to you?" He looks at her, sees who it is, and says, "Your boyfriend, that's what happened to me, and he's gonna pay." Risa could ask him a dozen questions about that, but the kid's bleeding all over his shirt, and the first priority is to stop it. He tips his head back. "No," Risa tells him. "Lean forward, otherwise you'll gag on your own blood." The kid listens. The tribunal of three come out from behind their desk to see what they can do, but Risa has it under control. "Pinch it like this," she tells him. "You need to be patient with this kind of thing." She shows the kid exactly how to pinch his nose to stem the flow of blood. Then, once the bleeding stops, Portside comes over to her and says, "Nice work." She's immediately promoted from dishwasher to medic. Funny, but it's indirectly Connor's doing, since he's the one who broke that kid's nose in the first place. As for the kid with the bloody nose, he gets assigned to dishwashing. The first few days, actually trying to act like a medic without any real training is terrifying. There are other kids in the medical jet who seem to know a lot more, but she quickly comes to realize that they were thrown into this just like she was when they first arrived. "You'll do fine. You're a natural," the senior medic, who was all of 17, tells her. He's right. Once she gets used to the idea, handling first aid, standard illnesses, and even suturing simple wounds becomes as familiar to her as playing the piano. The days begin to pass quickly, and before she realizes it, she's been there a month. Each day that goes by adds to her sense of security. The Admiral was an odd bird, but he'd done something no one else had been able to do for her since she left Stayho. He'd given her back her right to exist. Chapter 34. Connor. Like Risa, Connor finds his niche by accident. Connor never considered himself mechanically capable, but there are few things he can stand less than a bunch of morons standing around looking at something that doesn't work and wondering who's going to fix it. During that first week, while Risa's off learning how to be an exceptionally good fake doctor, Connor decides to figure out the workings of a fried air conditioning unit, then find replacement parts from one of the junk piles and gets it working again. He soon comes to realize it's the same way with every other broken thing he comes across. Sure, it began with trial and error, but the errors become fewer and fewer as the days go by. There are plenty of other kids who claim to be mechanics and are really good at explaining why things won't work. Connor, on the other hand, actually fixes them. It quickly gets him reassigned from trash duty to repair crew, and since there are endless things to repair, it keeps his mind off of other things, such as how little he gets to see Risa in the Admiral's tightly structured world, and how quickly Roland is advancing through the social ranks of the place. Roland has managed to get himself one of the best assignments in the graveyard. By working the angles and applying plenty of flattery, he's been taken on as the pilot's assistant. Mostly, he just keeps the helicopter cleaned and fueled, but the assignment reeks of an apprenticeship. He's teaching me how to fly it, he overhears Roland tell a bunch of other kids one day. Connor shudders to think of Roland behind the controls of a helicopter, but many kids are impressed by Roland. His age gives him seniority, and his manipulations gain him either fear or respect from a surprising number of others. Roland draws his negative energy from the kids around him, and there are a lot of kids here for him to draw from. Social manipulation is not one of Connor's strengths. Even among his own team, he's a bit of a mystery. Kids know not to tread on him because he has a low tolerance for irritation and idiocy, but there's no one they'd rather have on their side than Connor. People like you because you've got integrity, Hayden tells him, even when you're being an ass. Connor has to laugh at that. Him, integrity. There have been plenty of people in Connor's life who would think differently. But on the other hand, he's changing. He's been getting into fewer fights. Maybe it's because there's more room to breathe here than in the warehouse. Or maybe he's been working out his brain enough for it to successfully muscle his impulses into line. A lot of that has to do with Risa, because every time he forces himself to think before acting, it's her voice in his head telling him to slow down. He wants to tell her, but she's always so busy in the medical jet, and you don't just up to somebody and say, I'm a better person because you're in my head. She's also still in Roland's head, and that worries Connor. At first, Risa had been a tool to provoke Connor into a fight, but now Roland sees her as a prize. Now, instead of using brute strength against her, he tries to charm her at every turn. You're not actually falling for him, are you? He asks her one day, on one of the rare occasions he can get her alone. I'll pretend you didn't just ask that, she tells him in disgust. But Connor has reasons to wonder. On that first night here, he offered you his blanket, and you accepted it, he points out. Only because I knew it would make him cold. And when he offers you food, you take it. Because it means he goes hungry. It's coolly logical. Connor finds it amazing that she can put her emotions aside and be as calculating as Roland, beating him at his own game. Another reason for Connor to admire her. Work call! It happens about once a week beneath the meeting canopy, the only structure in the entire graveyard that isn't part of a plane, and the only place large enough to gather all 423 kids. Work call. A chance to get out into the real world. A chance to have a life. Sort of. The Admiral never attends, but there are video feeds from the meeting canopy, just as there are feeds all over the yard, so everyone knows he's watching. Whether or not every camera is constantly monitored, no one knows, but the potential for being seen is always there. Connor did not care for the Admiral the first day he met him. The sight of all those video cameras shortly thereafter made Connor like him even less. It seems each day there's something to add to his general feeling of disgust with the man. Amp leads the work call meeting with his megaphone and clipboard. A man in Oregon needs a team of 5 to clear cut a few acres of forest, Amp announces. You'll be given room and board and taught to use the tools of the trade. The job should take a few months, and in the end, you'll get new identities, 18-year-old identities. Amp doesn't let them know the salary because there is none. The admiral gets paid, though. He gets paid a purchase price. Any takers? There are always takers. Sure enough, more than a dozen hands go up. 16-year-olds mostly. 17s are too close to 18 to make it worth their while, and younger kids are too intimidated by the prospect. Report to the admiral after this meeting. He'll make the final decision as to who goes. Work call infuriates Connor. He never puts his hand up, even if it's something he might actually want to do. The admiral's using us, he says to the kids around him. Don't you see that? Most of the kids just shrug, but Hayden's there, and he never misses an opportunity to add his peculiar wisdom to a situation. I'd rather be used whole than in pieces, Hayden says. Amp looks at his clipboard and holds up the megaphone again. House cleaning services, he says. 3 are needed, female preferred, no false IDs, but the location is secure and remote, which means you'll be safe from the juvie cops until you turn 18. Connor won't even look. Please tell me no one raised their hand. About 6 girls, all 17 years old, it looks like, says Hayden. I guess no one wants to be a house girl for more than a year. This place isn't a refuge, it's a slave market. Why doesn't anyone see that? Who says they don't see it? It's just that unwinding makes slavery look good. It's always the lesser of two evils. I don't see why there have to be any evils at all. As the meeting breaks up, Connor feels a hand on his shoulder. He thinks it must be a friend, but it's not. It's Roland. It's such a surprise, it takes Connor a moment before he reacts. He shakes Roland's hand off. Something you want? Just to talk. Don't you have a helicopter to wash? Roland smiles at that. Less washing, more flying. Cleaver made me his unofficial co pilot. Cleaver must have a death wish. Connor doesn't know who he's more disgusted with, Roland or the pilot for being suckered in by him. Roland looks around at the thinning crowd. The Admiral's got some racket going here, doesn't he? He says. Most of the losers here don't care, but it bothers you, doesn't it? Your point? Just that you're not the only one who thinks the Admiral needs some retraining. Connor doesn't like where this is going. What I think of the Admiral is my business. Of course it is. Have you seen his teeth, by the way? What about them? Pretty obvious they're not his. I hear he keeps a picture of the kid he got them from in his office. An unwind like us who, thanks to him, never made it to 18. Makes you wonder how much more of him comes from us. Makes you wonder if there's anything left of the original Admiral at all. This is too much information to process here and now. And considering the source, Connor doesn't want to process it at all, but he knows he will. Roland, let me make this as clear to you as I can. I don't trust you. I don't like you. I don't want to have anything to do with you. I can't stand you either, Roland says. Then he points to the Admiral's jet. But right now, we've got the same enemy. Roland strolls off before anyone else can take notice of their conversation, leaving Connor with a heaviness in his stomach. The very idea that he and Roland could in any way be on the same side makes him feel like he's swallowed something rancid. For a week, that seed Roland planted in Connor's brain grows. It's fertile ground because Connor already distrusted the Admiral. Now, every time he sees the man, Connor notices something. His teeth are perfect. They're not the teeth of an aging war veteran. The way he looks at people, looking into their eyes, it's as if he were sizing those eyes up, looking for a pair that might suit him. And those kids that disappear on work calls, since they never come back, who's to know where they really go? Who's to say they don't all get sent off to be unwound? The Admiral says his goal is to save unwinds, but what if he's got an entirely different agenda? These thoughts keep Connor awake at night, but he won't share them with anyone, because once he does, it aligns him with Roland, and that's an alliance he never wants to make. During their fourth week in the graveyard, while Connor is still building his case against the Admiral in his own mind, a plane arrives. It's the first one since the old FedEx jet that brought them here, and like that jet, this one is packed full of live cargo. While the five Goldens march the new arrivals from their jet, Connor works on a faulty generator. He watches them with mild interest as they pass, wondering if any of them would be more mechanically skilled than him and bump him into a less enviable position. Then, toward the back of the line of kids, is a face he thinks he recognizes. Someone from home? No, someone else. All at once, it comes to him who this is. It's the boy he was sure had been unwound weeks ago. It's the kid he kidnapped for his own good. It's Lev. Connor drops his wrench and runs toward him, but gains control before he gets there, burying his mixed flood of feelings beneath a calm saunter. This is the kid who betrayed him. This is the kid he once swore he'd never forgive. And yet, the thought of him unwound had been too much to bear. But Lev hasn't been unwound. He's right here, marching off to the supply jet. Connor is thrilled. Connor is furious. Lev doesn't see him yet, and that's fine because it gives Connor some time to take in what he sees. This is no longer the clean cut tithe he pulled out of his parents' car more than 2 months before. This kid has long, unkempt hair and a hardened look about him. This kid isn't in tithing whites, but wears torn jeans and a dirty red t shirt. Connor wants to let him pass, just so he can have time to process this new image, but Lev sees him and gives him a grin right away. This is also different, because during that brief time they knew each other, Lev had never been pleased by Connor's presence. Lev steps toward him. Stay in line, orders Amp. The supply jet's this way. But Connor waves Amp off. It's okay. I know this one. Amp reluctantly gives in. Make sure he gets to the supply jet, and he returns to herding the others. So how are things? Says Lev. Just like that. How are things? You'd think they were buds back from summer vacation. Connor knows what he has to do. It's the only thing that will ever make things right between him and Lev. Once again, it's instinctive action without time for thought. Instinctive, not irrational. Impassioned, but not impulsive. Connor has come to know the difference. He hauls off and punches Lev in the eye. Not hard enough to knock him down, but hard enough to snap his head halfway around and give him a nasty shiner. Before Lev can react, Connor says, That's for what you did to us. Then, before Lev can respond, he does something else sudden and unexpected. He pulls Lev toward him and hugs him tightly, the way he hugged his own little brother last year when he took first place in the district pentathlon. I'm really, really glad you're alive, Lev. Yeah, me too. He lets Lev go before it starts feeling awkward, and when he does, he can see Lev's eye is already beginning to swell, and an idea occurs to him. Come on, I'll take you over to the medical jet. I know someone who will take care of that eye. It isn't until later that night that Connor gets an inkling of how much Lev has truly changed. Connor is shaken awake sometime during the night. He opens his eyes to a flashlight shining in his face, so close the light hurts. Hey, what is this? Shh, says a voice behind the flashlight. It's Lev. Lev should have been in the newcomer's jet. That's where all the kids go until they get sorted onto their teams. There are strict orders that no one is to be out at night. Apparently, Lev is no longer a boy bound by rules. What are you doing here? Connor says. Do you know the trouble you could be in? He still can't see Lev's face behind that flashlight. You hit me this afternoon, says Lev. I hit you because I owed that to you. I know. I deserved it, and so it's okay, says Lev. But don't you ever hit me again, or you'll regret it. Although Connor has no intention of ever punching Lev out again, he does not respond well to ultimatums. I'll hit you, says Connor, if you deserve it. Silence from behind the flashlight. Then Lev says, Fair enough, but you better make sure that I do. The light goes off. Lev leaves, but Connor can't sleep. Every unwind has a story you don't want to know. He supposes that Lev now has his. The Admiral calls for Connor 2 days later. Apparently, he has something in need of repair. His residence is an old 747 that was used as Air Force One years before any of the kids here were born. The engines had been removed and the presidential seal painted over, but you could still see a shadow of the emblem beneath the paint. Connor climbs the stairs with a bag of tools, hoping that whatever it is, he can get in and out quickly. Like everyone else, he has a morbid curiosity about the man, and he wonders what an old presidential jet looks like on the inside. But being under the admiral's scrutiny scares the hell out of him. He steps through the hatch to find a couple of kids tidying up. They're younger kids that Connor doesn't know. He thought the Goldens might be in here, but they're nowhere to be seen. As for the jet, it's not nearly as luxurious as Connor had expected. The leather seats have tears, the carpet is almost worn through. It looks more like an old motorhome than Air Force One. Where's the Admiral? The Admiral steps out from the deeper recesses of the jet. Although Connor's eyes are still adjusting to the light, he can see the Admiral is holding a weapon. Connor, I'm glad you could make it. Connor winces at the sight of the gun and the realization that the Admiral knows him by name. What do you need that for? Connor asks, pointing at the gun. Just cleaning it, says the Admiral. Connor wonders why he would still have a clip in a gun he was cleaning, but decides it's best not to ask. The Admiral puts the gun into a drawer and locks it. Then he sends the two kids off and seals the hatch behind them. This is exactly the kind of situation Connor feared most, and he can feel a rush of adrenaline begin to tingle in his fingers and toes. His awareness becomes heightened. You need me to fix something, sir? Yes, I do. My coffee maker. Why don't you just take one from the other planes? Because, says the Admiral calmly, I prefer to have this one repaired. He leads Connor through the jet, which seems even larger on the inside than out, filled with cabins, conference rooms, and studies. You know, your name comes up quite often, the Admiral says. This is news to him, and not welcome news either. Why? First, for the things you repair. Then, for the fighting. Connor senses a reprimand on the way. Yes, he's had fewer fights here than usual, but the Admiral is a man of zero tolerance. Sorry about the fighting. Don't be. Oh, there's no question that you're a loose cannon, but more often than not, you're aimed in the right direction. I don't know what you mean, sir. From what I can see, each fight you've engaged in has resolved one problem or another, even the fights you lose. So, even then, you're fixing things. He offers Connor that white toothed smile. Connor shudders. He tries to hide it, but he's sure the Admiral sees it. They come to a small dining room and galley. Here we are, says the Admiral. The old coffee maker sits on a counter. It's a simple device. Connor's about to pull out a screwdriver to open up the back when he notices that it's not plugged in. When he plugs it in, the light comes on and it starts to gurgle out coffee into the little glass pot. Well, how about that? Says the Admiral, with another of his terrible grins. I'm not here for the coffee maker, am I? Have a seat, the Admiral says. I'd rather not. Have one, anyway. That's when Connor sees the picture. There are several photos up on the wall, but the one that captures Connor's attention is of a smiling kid about his age. The smile looks familiar. In fact, it looks exactly like the Admiral's smile. It's just like Roland had said. Now, Connor wants to bolt, but Reese's voice is in his head again, telling him to scan his options. Sure, he can run. Chances are he can get to the hatch before the Admiral can stop him, but opening the hatch won't be easy. He could hit the Admiral with one of his tools. That might give him enough time to get away. But where would he go? Beyond the graveyard, there's just desert, desert, and more desert. In the end, he realizes his best choice is to do as the Admiral says. He sits down. You don't like me, do you? Asks the Admiral. Connor won't meet his gaze. You saved my life by bringing me here. You will not avoid answering this question. You don't like me, do you? Connor shudders once more, and this time doesn't even try to hide it. No, sir, I don't. I want to know your reasons. Connor lets out a single rueful chuckle as his answer. You think I'm a slave dealer, says the Admiral. and that I'm using these unwinds for my own profit? If you know what I'm going to say, why ask me? I want you to look at me. But Connor doesn't want to see the man's eyes, or more accurately, doesn't want the Admiral seeing his. I said, look at me. Reluctantly, Connor lifts his eyes and fixes them on the Admiral's. I'm looking. I believe you are a smart kid. Now, I want you to think. Think. I am a decorated admiral of the United States Navy. Do you think I need to be selling children to earn money? I don't know. Think. Do I care about money and lavish things? I do not live in a mansion. I do not vacation on a tropical island. I spend my time in the stinking desert, living in a rotting plane 365 days a year. Why do you think that is? I don't know. I think you do. Connor stands up now. In spite of the Admiral's tone of voice, he feels less and less intimidated by him. Whether it's wise or whether it's foolhardy, Connor decides to give the Admiral what he's asking for. You do it because of the power. You do it because it lets you keep hundreds of helpless kids in the palm of your hand. And you do it because you can pick and choose who gets unwound and which parts you'll get. The Admiral is caught off guard by this. Suddenly, he's on the defensive. What did you say? It's obvious. All the scars and those teeth, they're not the ones you were born with, are they? So, what is it you want from me? Is it my eyes or my ears? Or maybe it's my hands that can fix things so well. Is that why I'm here? Is it? The Admiral's voice is a predatory growl. You've gone too far. No, you've gone too far. The fury in the Admiral's eyes should terrify Connor, but his cannon has come loose and it's beyond locking down. We come to you in desperation. What you do to us is obscene. So I'm a monster then. Yes. And my teeth are the proof? Yes. Then you can have them. Then the Admiral does something beyond imagining. He reaches into his mouth, grabs onto his own jaw, and rips the teeth out of his mouth. His eyes blazing at Connor, he hurls the hard pink clump in his hand down on the table, where it clatters into two horrible pieces. Connor screams in shock. It's all there. Two rows of white teeth, two sets of pink gums. But there's no blood. Why is there no blood? There's no blood in the Admiral's mouth either. His face seems to have collapsed onto itself. His mouth is just a floppy, puckered hole. Connor doesn't know which is worse, the Admiral's face or the bloodless teeth. They're called dentures, the Admiral says. They used to be common in the days before unwinding. But who wants false teeth when, for half the price, you can get real ones straight from a healthy unwind? I had to get these made in Thailand. No one does it here anymore. I I don't understand. Connor looks at the false teeth and jerks his head almost involuntarily toward the picture of the smiling boy. The Admiral follows his gaze. That, says the Admiral, was my son. His teeth looked very much like my own at that age, so they designed my dentures using his dental records. It's a relief to hear an explanation other than the one Roland gave. I'm sorry. The Admiral neither accepts nor rejects Connor's apology. The money I get for placing unwinds into service positions is used to feed the ones who remain and to pay for the safe houses and warehouses that get runaway unwinds off the street. It pays for the aircraft that get them here and pays off anyone who needs bribery to look the other way. After that, the money that remains goes into the pockets of each unwind on the day they turn 18 and are sent out into this unforgiving world. So you see, I may still be, by your definition of the word, a slave dealer, but I am not quite the monster you think I am. Connor looks to the dentures that still sit there, glistening on the table. He thinks to grab them and hand them back to the Admiral as a peace offering, but decides the prospect is simply too disgusting. He lets the Admiral do it himself. Do you believe the things I've told you today? The Admiral asks. Connor considers it, but finds his compass is out of whack. Truth and rumors, facts and lies are all spinning in his head so wildly, he still can't say what is what. I think so, says Connor. No so, says the Admiral, because you will see things today more awful than an old man's false teeth. I need to know that my trust in you is not misplaced.